So folks, welcome to the UK and Ireland Recruitment Conference 2020. Absolute pleasure to see you all here. Just to give you an introduction, my name is Adam from Startup Network Europe. I don't actually have a background in recruitment, but I saw really good things going on in the DEI area. I think it's a really great cause. And I thought I might as well contact Vincent from Swyg to see if we could do something together. We only did this, we only contacted each other maybe 2 weeks ago. So to get so many great speakers, to get so many great people like you here, we're very happy with the results. Vincent, maybe you can give a quick introduction to the event.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So just double check, Adam, can you see me and hear me okay?
Yeah, all is good.
All right, excellent. So first of all, Adam, thanks a lot for organizing this event and also for giving myself and the rest of the Swyg team the opportunity to contribute and help organize. And thanks to Radina and the rest of the Swyg team for making this happen. Like, your work has been absolutely amazing. And I've also been blown away by the positive experience we've had or the positive feedback we've had from attendees and speakers. So thanks to all the speakers for contributing to this event. Now, I did want to say a couple of things just to set the stage here. So we're talking about diversity and inclusion. And in the last year, we've actually seen a lot of positive headlines. For example, the number of female-founded startups has doubled in the last decade. The number of female members of boards of directors in the UK has doubled in the last decade. But if you look below the headline, it also shows there's a lot of work still to be done because those numbers are still too low. So the number of female board directors is 30% in the UK. That's a pretty dismal number. The number of female-founded funded startups globally is about 20%, which is also a pretty abysmal number when you think about it. So there's a very, very long road to go. So that would be one of my reasons for wanting to put on this event, but also one of my takeaway messages that if you read positive news, that's great, but we have a long way to go. So let's work together to get there. Now, one of the things that we made a key focus of this event is practical tips. What can you actually do to make a difference here? So at Swyg, we spent a lot of time researching the science of interviewing. That's really what we do. And so let me give you one tip of what you can do in your hiring process to move the needle on inclusivity. There's a lot of tips I could give you, but if it's the one thing that you can start doing tomorrow, it's get a second opinion. If you're looking at as a CV, or you're doing a phone screen, or even if it's your final interview, before you reject a candidate or hire a candidate for that matter, get a colleague to also look at that candidate independently. This is one of the most powerful things you can do to reduce bias in your process. And if you want to know more about why that's the case or how to do that, I'm happy to connect after the conference to talk more. But that would be my one short tip for the day. So with that, I would hand it back to Adam. And I'm really looking forward to the rest of the conference.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vincent. Thanks for all your hard work. Vincent did a great job in particular of getting all the speakers here, so I'm very grateful. So folks, the plan for today is very simple. We're going to have 30 minutes of rapid fire talks now from different speakers in different industries. Should be very interesting. Each talk will be about 2 minutes long. Then we're going to go into a panel discussion with 4 or 5 different people, and then breakout rooms. So it's actually our first time doing breakout rooms. We think it's really interesting because each room will have a different topic, a different moderator, and there'll be less people, obviously, so you can actually talk with everyone and have a good conversation. And then we're going to have networking. So we're all going to talk about what we learned from the breakout rooms. We're going to share some points, and then we'll close the event. So really, I think now we're ready to go. Radina, I'll let you take it from here.
Lovely. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you, everyone, once again for deciding to spend the afternoon with us. Absolutely. And as the two guys before me said, we have gathered this event. We've created it with the whole with the sole purpose of giving you a bit more tangible, real insights about diversity and inclusion and equity practices. So without further ado, we have 11 very, very interesting presenters, speakers that will share within 2 minutes. So guess what? They have very limited amount of time. Within 2 minutes, they will have to share all of the different insights that they have gathered or a specific practice that they have created and successfully established in their organization. So first things first, I would like to welcome Richa, who is Head of Talent Acquisition and Diversity for Europe at Avanade.
I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure, absolutely. So would you like to share a screen, or you would like to just talk about the practice?
I'm just going to talk about it.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'm going to say it never is just the one thing. So I'm sorry, it's not, but it's going to count as one tip. I think our D&I approach has been one where we've been able to build a D&I journey through a pictorial representation workflow. And I think that always works really well, especially if you want to take it to different groups, stakeholders, your teams, you know, HR. There are just so many different groups all working towards a D&I journey. So for me, the tip would be have a pictorial representation workflow, literally showing every single thing that you need to be in place. And that what that picture does is it almost creates this number of practices which are all entwined across the organization. And what that in effect does, it showcases accountability of, you know, different groups. So it emphasizes actually the importance of multiple activities, multiple initiatives, and sources of feedback. So as an example, what this will show is from the start to the end. So it takes into account individuals coming through the talent acquisition funnel, then it takes into account retention development, and eventually data metrics, which, you know, could be at different phases. So the pictorial representation, I think, is probably the tip I would give, is to, you know, whatever your plans are, whatever you wish to do, just put it out there on a piece of paper and give, you know, pictures tend to have a really good impact. So within that, as an example, in my organization, you know, we were able to put together hiring manager interviewer training. It's really interesting that, you know, the conversation here started with that. So yes, to look at biases, you then have to leverage various networks within the organization. So these are employee resource groups or ambassador networks, as we call them. So, you know, maybe showcasing some really fantastic females or certain ethnicities who are already part of the organization and help them, you know, come on board. Well, rather get their help come on board. And data metrics obviously plays a key part. And external partnerships, really. So that probably is a tip. Just put it all on paper and with pictures.
Amazing, Richa. 2 minutes on the dot. Well done. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing this. Now we have Akbar, who is going to be next. He's a talent coach at Founders Factory. Welcome, Akbar.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Before I begin, does everyone have their pen? I can't see you. Perfect. Okay. Starting off, number one, publish your data. First thing I'm going to suggest is the Know Your Data campaign set by what you can't measure. Don't think of sentiment. Write it down. It's a fantastic resource for you to know how to ask questions and know how to potentially get good insights. Here are good examples of businesses that have done it publicly. These are big businesses, small businesses, in VCs. Look at these for examples. Okay, don't go back to the office. This is one of the things that we've already seen a black swan example. Do not go back. Here are some of the reasons why. You do not have more money than Twitter. You do not have more money than Google. Why are you gonna be offering something for them to be trying to move against? When you're closing candidates, if you're not offering remote working, how are you gonna be able to offer this later on? Follow the VC money. These are startups that are gaining traction because people are using these apps. Are you smarter than these guys? Do you have more money than these guys? Do not go back to the office. But on the real point, all of us have reservations regarding office work. Here is sentiments from parents and non-parents about thoughts around working from home. You need to win this argument and explain the positives of working from home. Even if you're bad with your ratios and you're horrible at DEI, if you have a bigger total addressable market, it makes it easier. Here you go. This is React developers in London, 5,800. If you just do the whole UK, 13,000. If you do the whole world, that's that. Even if you have awful ratios, you're still going to do better. And last but not least, tell people how much you're getting paid, because your staff are going to keep you to account.
That was beautiful. Straight to the point, Akbar. Yes, whoever can win the game against Twitter, go for it. But if you can't make the time for and the commitment for flex work and work from home. Thank you so much. Great. Now we have next Teresa Bowie, who is a TEDx speaker, founder and CEO of The Jungle HR. Hey there, Teresa.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here with you today. I'll set my timer so I won't run over. Great. Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to share with you was a model and methodology that I've created to help organisations essentially take diversity and inclusion off the too difficult pile. We've heard some of the great things that are already taking place and that fit within that methodology. But I created the methodology called Tribe, because I think when you're building your kind of your workforce, you are creating that that kind of community and that sense of belonging. So the first thing we've definitely heard already is all about taking stock. So it's about your data, it's about just checking in what you've got at the moment, but the key thing is to really kind of assess your own diversity and inclusion journey here. So places to look at, of course, will be your recruitment processes that we're here today to explore, job architecture, things like pay and reward. So what are you doing around those? Again, the previous speaker talked about that and the level of transparency. So take stock is really important. The next part of the methodology is all around raising awareness. So why do we even need to think about diversity and inclusion? And one of the things I encourage you to think about here is everybody's unique difference. We all have one. So what is it and how can we really harness that? We need to kind of tune in here to sort of unconscious biases as well. Inspire and evolve. Everybody plays a role when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So do you have accessible role models that can share their journeys and think about ways that everyone can be involved? Build for the future. So what are we going to do to build for the future? Talent acquisition. And then finally, we have embed. How do we make sure that we embed all of these brilliant inclusion initiatives forward? So next slide, please. I'm very conscious of time. We should have, yeah, so my top tips: diagnose your D&I activities. Everyone plays a role. Make sure inclusion is inclusive as opposed to exclusive inclusion. Break with tradition. We've seen that at the moment with kind of flexible working or agile working. But remember, inclusion is 24/7 and not just when people are looking. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Teresa, for the very visual top 5 list. Really, really appreciate that. Now we have next Ross Taylor, who is the founder of Hidden. Hi there, Ross.
Hi, thanks for having me. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for coming. My timer is on. So I'm the founder of Hidden. We create diverse, talent and inclusive culture strategies for a better working world. And we do that from working inside creative and technology businesses. So I thought I'd talk about a practical case study today of a business called Vaynermedia, which is a global agency run by entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk, of which we look after their talent acquisition. And particularly this year, we've been in a very high growth state, which has obviously had its challenges through the pandemic and remote working, but also dealing with, and quite rightly, the social uprising associated with Black Lives Matter and the understanding of how we can uplift and empower Black talent in technology. The first thing that we did, very importantly, is looking at data. That's come up a couple of times, but I think it's really important that we explain why that keeps coming up, because I feel that organizations must understand that in order to achieve diversity, inclusivity is a compulsory activating ingredient and only will you get the benefits of a diverse workforce when inclusive cultures also exist. So for me, diversity is about who you hire, and inclusion refers to the extent to which employees are valued, respected, accepted, and encouraged. So it's really important to take that data to know where you're starting from, therefore you can measure where you're going. In terms of the talent acquisition strategies that we've implemented over this time, we look at 4 key levers, which is the talent pool, the employer brand, the interview process, and onboarding. 2 things to pick up for me. We work with the Neuro Leadership Institute, who say that you can't take bias out of people, but you can take it out of the process. So look at your hiring process, utilize technology. We've built our own, which removes bias from hiring, presenting candidates without name, age, gender, or education, which McKinsey states makes up 60% of the decision as to whether you will see someone for first interview. And the second thing is build a contextualization model into your decision-making, which means take into account education and different socioeconomic contexts based on people's individual achievements. 2 minutes, there we go.
Lovely work. Thank you so much for sharing this key example of your practice. Really appreciate that, Ross. And now we have Sasha Scott, who is the founder of the Inclusive Group. Hi there, Sasha.
Hi there. Thanks very much. Okay, time is on, right. So what I would say is this. First of all, start with inclusion, because frankly, without inclusion, diversity is a waste of money, because inclusion has got to be the beating heart of your strategy. Inclusion is what matters to people, a sense of belonging. Adopt a holistic approach. You're never going to get diversity and inclusion right with just one thing. So it's got to be everything. Work out the burning platform for your business. Burning platform is usually around purpose, ethics, culture, conduct, compliance, what our clients are saying. So get that right. Choose good help. It's bandit country out there. There are multiple diversity consultancies. I would say that, wouldn't I? But it's very easy to get this wrong. You get this wrong, the costs are limitless. So use a good subject matter expert consultancy if that's where you're going to go. Use and take everybody with you. This is not about minorities, it is about everybody, even white straight men. So harness ally community and really look upon inclusion as a verb. It's a doing word. We're all diverse because we're all human, but there is a choice when it comes to inclusivity. You can try and attract the most smartest diverse talent, but people do not stay unless they feel valued and appreciated. So this fundamentally is about behavior. As Vincent said, it is about bias. It's a hell of a lot easier to debias a system than it is a person. So get the numbers right. Couldn't agree more with what everybody has said before me. It is about data, but it's also about behavior. Accountability is utterly critical here. Do not sweep the bad apples under the carpet. This is about, change for good. And this ultimately is about attracting talent and keeping talent and putting people into an environment that they can be themselves, authenticity, psychological safety, and they will then thrive. And that is my time.
Excellent work, Sasha. So much wisdom so far in literally 2 minutes. Wow. Excellent job. Thank you. Now we have Ben Gallias, who is the head of diversity at Media Contacts. Hey there, Ben.
Hi, thanks very much. I just wanted to echo what Sasha was saying on inclusivity and retention, because I'm going to speak about the other end, which is talent attraction. So we're a recruitment agency. We work with media, intelligence, and tech businesses. And since March, 60% of the placements that we've made have been from groups that are currently underrepresented in our sectors. I want to speak about how other companies can improve their own results by getting the basics of recruitment processes right. So in March, we reviewed our processes, and the 2 areas that I feel had the biggest impact on what we're able to achieve were defining what the ideal candidate is and on writing job ads. So let's start with the ideal candidate. So many of our clients want to be the most diverse and inclusive employer in their sector, but they'll very rarely look outside of that sector for talent. And the issue is very obvious. If you want to be the most diverse workforce, but are only recruiting from your own sector, the best result you can achieve is to echo the bias that already exists within the industry. So we've encouraged companies to assess via skills and competencies rather than looking specifically at which businesses they've worked for in the past. Not only does that allow businesses to access a much wider and more diverse candidate pool, but it also allows for new ideas to come into the business itself. So as I mentioned, the second area was job adverts. And when recruiters write ads, they tend to write ads that they themselves would apply for. As a result of which they get applicants that look like them, that behave like them, that sound like them, which in many ways is an acceleration of what unconscious bias is. When we looked at the way that we were describing opportunities, more often than not, the ads would include some form of biased language. And there are significant studies that suggest that gendered adjectives massively affect who will apply to your business. So it's words like confident, strong, and decisive are proven to put minority groups off applying. So I put together a list of these adjectives and a guide on writing top job ads that I'd happily share. The three main takeaways are: make every attempt to widen the candidate pool, recruit on skills and competencies rather than on familiarity, and make sure your ads are written to the audience that you want to hire. And that was it, really.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ben, for presenting the recruiter perspective from that point of view when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Excellent. So then we have Anna Chris, who is the head of diversity and inclusion at CFC Beat Ideas. Welcome, Anna.
Hello from Ukraine. Just a second, I'd like to share my screen. Here we go. So I'm from Ukraine, but have returned from Ireland in 2019, where as a part of Dogpatch Labs, we implemented the Diversity in Tech initiative aimed at bringing more diversity into the tech startup field. The project was selected for the D&I award by Google for Startups. Last year, I joined CFC Big Ideas. It's an international business consultancy based in Ukraine, my home country, and the UAE. This year, we launched the Global Inclusion Online Forum, the world's biggest online gathering of day professionals and activists. One of the biggest debates among D&I professionals globally, as you know, is about the business case of inclusion. There are many research studies proving the business case for diversity on a macro level, and very few micro stories proving it. Now I'm going to tell you, it's Dublin actually. Sorry, I forgot about the slides. I'm going to tell you one of our own inclusion stories with a clearly proven business case which can be used in big and small companies across the world. So 1 year ago, we realized our reception desk wasn't working effectively. Our receptionist was often on the move, while the job needed one to be present at the desk to pick up incoming calls and open doors for visitors. We realized this position could be actually more suitable for less mobile people. So we installed several CCTV cameras, remote log control, and virtual reception software to make it function. And we hired Natalia and Lilia, wonderful ladies who are using wheelchairs, who would take 4 to 5 shifts during the day to provide administrative support. We allowed them to work flexible hours, coordinating schedules between themselves. And also, of course, we involved them in all aspects of our corporate life and including team celebrations. So the result of such a move was a smooth transition into remote reception, which works much more efficiently than the previous on-site model. No complaints from colleagues and no missed calls from clients. So sometimes implementing your inclusion strategy in a business effective way requires some creativity. But if you're really into it, your team mind will always find a way. We are planning to continue our global discussion and have more companies sharing stories like this in May 2021. So please tune into our social media and join the Global Inclusion Online Forum 2021.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this recap, Anna. Really, really appreciate it. And now we have Deborah Felix, who is the head of diversity at the boutique executive search firm. Hi there, Deborah.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm at Beta Search. So again, I come at this from an executive search angle. I've thought about diversity and inclusion from a ongoing business basis rather than purely talent acquisition. And I've got 10 top tips in terms of really what a CEO needs to commit to in order to increase inclusion and diversity. Number one, visibly demonstrate the business case for diversity. Promote your commitment within the business so that people really understand the benefits. Number two, gather the diversity data, track and report your progress. Use your data to guide your priorities. Number three, change mindsets, challenge bias and discrimination wherever you see it. Number four, insist on diversity for recruitment or promotion decisions. Number five, use promotional opportunities for your company to represent a diverse image. You know, we all think that this is superficial, but actually it does make a difference, and that's why everyone's doing it. Number six, speak on panels where organizers commit to have at least one man and one woman. It's amazing how many panels still exist today where it's like 10 white males. I particularly focus on real estate, and that really does happen. And the men should commit to not speaking on those panels if that's the case. Number seven, adopt a balanced approach to sponsorship. So it should be relevant to both. You know, again, obvious, don't just sponsor rugby matches, for example. Number eight, influence your supply chain. So demand of your lawyers, demand of everybody who works for you, you know, what is their diversity statistics? Number nine, personally, I engage with the diverse range of your workforce in your business to broaden your perspective and understand how they're feeling. Number 10, promote diversity and inclusion in any groups you're members of broadly in the industry and share good practice with each other. And those would be sort of 10 top tips for sort of CEOs who want to commit to it at the most senior level.
Excellent, Deborah. Thank you for sharing your top 10 tips. Really appreciate it. Lovely. So we have now Amma, who is the UK Head of Diversity and Inclusion at BNP Paribas. Hi there, Amma.
Hello, hi. Thanks for having me. Just to repeat, I'm Amma Akanzi. I'm the Head of D&I at BNP Paribas. I'm just going to focus on one initiative rather than the plethora, which I think helps change the D&I strategy, and that is focus groups. And what I've learned over the past couple of months in relation to the Black Lives Movement and the murder of George Floyd is that focus groups act as a safe space. So you will often have employees who are in difficult situations because of their background, and they've got nowhere to share that. They can speak about it meaningfully outside the office, but when they are in the office, they feel that they have to be mindful and not talk about it. So focus groups allow space for people to speak. What they secondly also do is that they allow you to build a catalogue of real life stories. And I think that changing people's decisions can be data driven, and you can present them with the hard facts. But I think you also have to focus on their hearts as well, and not just their minds. And I think what I've realized is that when you do share personal stories, it's very hard for people to deny that or not understand, even if they don't empathize, somebody's discomfort or somebody's concerns as to not being included. The third thing they do is that they mobilize your employee networks. And at BNP Paribas, that's what we did. We used our multicultural network to create these focus groups for people from Black and diverse backgrounds. And so they get involved. And once the networks get involved, that attracts employees who may not necessarily be engaged in the D&I space, so to speak, but when they see that that's something that's a network initiative and other people are getting involved, it has what I call the bandwagon effect. And the fourth thing that I wanted to share is that once you've built these focus groups and you've got their feedback and you've built these stories, it's a good way to present to management why your culture needs to change. And I think that's the piece that's often not discussed about in D&I initiatives, is that you can have all the promotion, all the retention, all the progression initiatives. But if the culture is the same, if the culture is such that nobody really is accepting diversity and inclusion, or they don't see the benefits, whether it's the business case, whether it's the emotional case, you're not going to get very far. So I think looking at your culture, working out how that can change and how you can include your diversity and inclusion initiatives it is definitely a way forward and something that I would highly recommend.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Amma. Really appreciate the scenario that you shared with us and this good practice when it comes to the internal groups. Thank you. So then we have Heather Frost, who is the founder and CEO of People and Practice, and she's also co-founder and partner of Antithesis Coaching. Apologies for my Eastern European accent. I hope I said it properly.
Oh, it's great. Antithesis. Actually, yeah, that's a good starting point, because I'm going to do my rapid talk from a point of slowing down, which is one of the hardest things to implement, I think, around inclusion and diversity, and creating the kind of space that people need to truly understand what they're trying to change. And bias has come up quite a few times, and it's probably worth thinking about when you're, either it's a small group, TA, org-wide, it doesn't really matter from that perspective, but people understand bias at a cognitive level and they can recognize it. But that's quite different to being able to recognize it when you feel it. So what I'm suggesting is, if you really want to kind of move for a more transformational versus tactical inclusion and diversity program, you actually have to get people in a space where they judge and they recognize when they're feeling empathy for, like I did this, I told a story and asked people to judge me, and asked people to think about when they've got empathy, emotional empathy or cognitive empathy, where they get curious. This wasn't about me at all. It was about them and being able to recognize where their triggers are in their body. So it's about the physiological role that judgment and bias and where it exists. And if you can help people recognize some of that and feel it, then they can track it. And then they've got a chance to respond to it. So that kind of unconscious element, we're trying to short circuit that a little bit. And that can happen with a small group of people. It can happen on a much larger scale, but it's much more around trying to understand what you're hoping to influence and change by creating those conditions. 2 minutes. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Heather, for bringing us the topic of empathy. Excellent timing, excellent topic. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And last but not least, we have Tony McLeland. Apologies, I tried to do my best Scottish accent, Tony, who is Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Champion and Advisor at First Life Group. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you. Good afternoon or evening, wherever you are. And I just want to kind of just come at a slightly different perspective from a leader or a CEO position within an organization. When you're asked such a question, what is your best strategy that you've implemented? You think, well, actually, you try to be really clever about it and have something really flashy and glitzy and singing and dancing, but actually, this is where we need to be really, really good at the basics. So my example to you is going to be a really basic one, because if we're good at the basics, we can build on that really easily. So I'm coming from a place of I is for inclusion. And as CEOs and as leaders of organizations, we need to be more visible to our staff. And when it's recruitment, if you're having a recruitment day, pop in. CEOs need to, and leaders need to pop in, say hello. It's about respect. It feeds into retention. I worked within an organization where I led 500 staff, and I used to do an update every Monday morning. I used to say, I call it a heads up. And I used to, you know, when you do these things, you think people don't look at it, they don't read it, you don't get any response back, and you think, oh. And one morning, it didn't come out until later on, but because it came out later on that morning, I was getting feedback from the other managers that actually, you know, people were looking for it. And so people were in the kitchen, they were, you know, the maintenance people or the staff, they were looking for this communication that I felt no one needed. So for me, it meant that they were listening and they wanted to be included. And so when we done our recruitment days or our first day of the induction, I would set aside 1 hour and make sure that those new people came into my office. We spent time together around a pot of coffee and a pot of tea, and just, how are you? Do you have children? And so when we met in the corridor a few days later, they were real conversations. They were conversations about, how are the children? How are you? How are you? You know, and you didn't have to go through the hierarchy. So my thing really is about, as a CEO, as a leader, make yourself visible, try and connect. Why do we have to wait until people are leaving before they see you, when they're getting sacked or told to move on? Meet them at the beginning, not just at the end, because they might not be an end. They might stay with you forever and ever. So my goodie bags on my day are, you know, filled with policies, and not just lollies, policies, and telling them how important they are in the organisation. So my I is for inclusion of staff.
Brilliant, Tony. Thank you so much. It couldn't have been a better wrap up than that. Bring the human connection back. So without further ado, I would love to welcome to the virtual scene the following experts. So Katrina, we have Katrina, who is the author, speaker, and facilitator at the Searchologist. Okay, I think I pronounced that well. Welcome, Katrina. We have Christy Idemudia, Senior HR Business Partner at Mercury. Hi, Christy.
Hi.
Lovely. We have Mervyn Tinen, who is HR Analyst, Researcher, and Strategist at the Two Heads Consulting. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Lovely, excellent. We have Ankita, who is the HR Business Partner and Equality Champion at Salesforce.
Hello.
Hi there. Hi, Ankita. We have Toju, who is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Practitioner at Google. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name properly. I hope that's it. Yeah?
Hi.
Hi there. And last but not least, we have Vincent, the CEO and founder of Swyg.
Thanks, Rita.
Thanks, everyone. So, obviously, you are a very, very diverse group, and you're coming with very different types of background. And we do have a few questions, of course. I guess one thing that really stood out when it comes to the impact of ignoring diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So unfortunately, for certain companies, this is not part of the top priorities, right? I think a couple of you mentioned that inclusion should be part, and it's the beating heart of the strategy. Sasha, I think I'm quoting you. But this is, I guess, a question for Katrina. And of course, if anyone else wants to join, that will be amazing. But what can be the impact of ignoring the power of diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly when it comes to the candidate experience and hiring? What can you share about this topic, and what can companies do about it?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're hitting me with that question, because I am not a DEI expert. I'm a candidate experience engagement expert. So it's like, but what I've noticed is if you go as a job seeker, if you were to sit there and start looking at roles as a job seeker, and you start, like, someone gets in touch, particularly if you're in tech, you know, skills are in short supply, so there's, you know, you're desperate to get people on board. If you sit and look at it from their point of view, they can see whether you're a diverse company, and they can see whether you're a genuinely diverse company. And there's a lot of like black boxes on Instagram, for example, but actually there's no follow through. There's no show of that inclusivity. And so people are like looking. And what I've really noticed as well, I was doing some research for a client for the last few weeks, and their tech company against the other tech companies. And it's like all of the diversity and inclusion seems to come out of the US. So you'll see these great programs going on the US and it's like Europe's a dead zone. So that's something as well to be really aware of. Like if you're not genuinely showing what programs you're putting in place, all of these groups, all of this stuff that you're doing for all forms of diversity, by the way, I've noticed we haven't touched on things like neurodiversity in this. Make sure it's visible. And to see an example of that, have a look at what ThoughtWorks do. On their blog, they have employee stories, all sorts, transgender employees, binary, whatever, sharing their genuine stories about what it's like to work there, just days in the life, all sorts of stuff, so that when people look at them, they go, actually, I want to work there because I can see they're inclusive. So it's free to do that. So obviously you have to be an inclusive organization, but it's free. And I just think if you don't do that, going forward, it's going to get harder and harder to recruit because people are in a comparison game. The internet has put 4.79 billion people online. People can compare. They're getting more and more comfortable using search. They're looking at you. Are you actually showing that you are diverse and inclusive?
That's it. And thank you so much for bringing the neurodiversity aspect as well. Indeed, this wasn't a topic that we touched on yet, but visibility and talking about it openly, as you said, on the career pages, having stories. Does anyone else from the panel has anything else to add when it comes to potential impact if we ignore or if we diminish the value of diversity, equity and inclusion? Anyone else can contribute to that question? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Mervyn can.
Mervyn,
as I've been nominated. I mean, I think I've done some research in this in my writing, and about to write a bit for our next book covers this. I think Katrina's right. Firstly, in that every business is open. When people are looking for jobs, they're not just looking at what you say about yourself or the pictures you post. They're searching for people saying, you know, when I worked at, when I used to work at, and they can get personal stories that people might put on social media, on personal blogs and things. So you are a lot more open, and the research shows job seekers more and more will not only search out kind of what you do, but it's what you like to work for, what the experience of working there is for. Are you an inclusive employer? Are you an employer that believes in kind of recognition, believes in thanks, is a nice place to work. So people remember the experiences. So I think that is hugely important. And I think that it's got to be obvious from the way you conduct your business that you are a very open business, that it's not, you know, it's not, you know, if you're showing off the you know, you're the champions amongst the management consulting men's football league or something in London, you're obviously showing that maybe you're not as diverse as you should be. You know, so I think there's the little things you have to remember.
Without a doubt.
There's been so much change in such a short period of time. Like in Mervyn and my careers, you know, we've both been in the workforce for over 30 years. There has been so much change. And it is a lot for companies, but it's just, if you really don't get involved in it now, you're really going to hamper your recruitment going forward. So it's time to address it for all the right reasons.
And I think as well that that what I'm seeing is, you know, CEOs, leaders are actually kind of being, you know, moved out of organizations based on their values as opposed to, you know, their work practices or their poor performance. You know, so there's a lot more focus on value and, you know, how you treat your staff. So, you know, no one can really escape it.
Very good point. Absolutely. And that actually feeds very well into another question. Realistically, how much impact can the employers have on diversity, inclusion practices when it comes to the belonging element as well? And if a lack of diversity manifests itself already, Ankita, I guess this could be an interesting question for you from the other side, now talking from a large tech employer. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think, and I like the question because, you know, what you're talking about is realistically what can be done. And I think to start with, I'd like to say that focusing on diversity and inclusion for any organization takes a lot of resources, and in terms of cost, time, and effort. And it is that's relatively easy and possible in larger setups where there can be an assigned IND team, or there could be at least a single role, one person whose responsibility is to just look at this, to run a diversity audit, see where are the gaps, and then build an entire strategy around it, and also be able to implement it while working with different business groups. But I think in a smaller organization, realistically, there will be like all kinds of challenges preventing people to focus on this, even if they do have that intention. And I'd been like thinking quite a bit about this, and I just feel that in such a scenario, the best thing that can be done is to form a community, because a lot of times what an individual organization may not be able to achieve, you can partner with different organizations and then see what collectively can be done. For instance, if there is a lack of gender diversity in tech, so just thinking beyond what is there on the surface and exploring other avenues, like engaging with educational institutes to see how we can get more diverse talent, or engaging with the government bodies to see how policies can be framed to get diverse talent, and what, based on the organization's needs. So just kind of thinking outside the box, and if not individually, then as a community of different smaller organizations.
That's an excellent point. And both you and then Katrina and Mervyn as well, you spoke about the small steps, and the devil is in the details, right? And it takes, as you said, Ankita, effort, conscious effort, dedication, and time. It's always time consuming to create practices, and especially practices that work. They do take some time. What are other challenges? And of course, this is a question for everyone else who wants to join. What other challenges do you see in terms of implementing the right practices? And I'm actually going to also start a poll for the audience so that they can join as well. But what else have you seen as practitioners in this field? Christy, Georgiou, would you like to join in, or anyone else to share what other challenges you've seen?
Yeah, one of the challenges, I think it's buy-in. One of the challenges is buy-in from the different stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Who do we need to engage with? Do they even know what diversity and inclusion is? I know it's been a topic, very topical issue in the last year or so, but you'll be amazed at how many leaders still do not know what that means. I remember not too long ago in a previous role, we were talking about diversity and inclusion, and one of the leaders said, "Oh, we are diverse here. We do have male, we have female here." And all they could see was just the physical diversity, not realizing that that is the tip of the iceberg, and that beneath the iceberg, there are so many things. It could be education, our philosophy, the way we grew. All those things add up to make the total person. And whether that person is being housed in a black individual or white individual, ultimately, we're different. And how do we include all of us in a conversation? What are those small things that we do to create that inclusive environment? So we need to understand, our leaders need to we need to demystify it. What does it mean? And sometimes we've so complicated it that it's now it's complex. What are the common sense tips, common sense practice that we could take out there to the leaders to demystify it and make it really simple, and that they see that these are simple steps that they could buy into and then begin to implement in the organization. So yeah, we need to engage more with the leaders. Brilliant. Yeah.
And it's so interesting that you were just mentioning the fact that we don't know, a lot of the leaders are not really fully aware what that actually means in perspective. And it seems like as we share the poll results, it's exactly that. The majority of the participants here as well say, well, one of the biggest challenges is that we don't have enough knowledge on what is the right practice. And of course, there are a variety of experts that we can reach out to for advice, but ultimately cultivating this knowledge, as you said, Christy, from the inside out is incredibly critical. Does anyone else has opinion on this matter when it comes to the, yeah?
I'd like to chip in if possible, because I think that that we have to make sure that we don't miss the step in between as well, which is about not leaders always, you know, leading something, but sometimes you have to empower the staff to lead it, you know, and let them know that it's okay. So just the thought, and let them develop it, because if you as a leader develop something, really they don't own it, because it wasn't their original thing. And when you do it in that way and empower them, you know, I've seen that transform organizations, you know, and I've seen some of my best staff just flourish because they've had an opportunity they've been empowered to go off and do something, not something that I've said, this is what you must do, go and develop it. So I think we need to just get that empowerment bit in between as well. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Agree with that.
Great, great.
The element of empowerment. And it seems like people are also mentioning the fact that from a technological perspective, I know a few of you already who are part of the rapid fire talks, you were talking about measuring the data and really understanding better how you can derive the right insights. And human can be quite biased, right? I mean, that's how we are born, but technology should make things either worse or better, right? And I guess this is a question as well for Toju, from your perspective. How do we balance? How do we create this balance between human input and use of technology, particularly when it comes to hiring people, developing them? Obviously, Tony mentioned this element as well. What do you all think about this?
Yeah, I think I'll start off with just, you know, singing the praise of technology, because I think technology is getting a very bad slant, even if we all depend on it every day. We can't do without our phones. I mean, this event is born on technology, right? We're using Zoom and all of that. So I think in the overall recruitment process, like tech is a necessity. I wouldn't call it a necessary evil, but it's definitely helping save HR loads of time, hours, you know, costs as well in going through CV applications, you know, depending on the technology software that a HR system or a HR person can use or a company can use. You know, it can actually help publish the job description, you know, enhances efficiency. There's lots of automation involved. It's increasing the pool, the talent of pool talent that we have. And there's so much technology can do in the overall recruitment process. That said, you already mentioned it. We know that technology is biased, but I mean, why is technology biased? It's biased because the humans who built it are biased. And I wouldn't say the bias in technology is intentional. Maybe it is by some people, but I don't think overall it is intentional. It's just built on the data. And many times the data is not as diverse and as inclusive as it should be, which leads to bias in the tech systems that are being used in recruitment today. There's also a counteractive argument out there that says technology should help reduce bias because they're machines or it's tech, and ideally it should not have any form of bias. And that's counteractive again, because any tech system that is being used today, especially when it leans on artificial intelligence, which all tech systems are leaning towards, it's built on data. And if the data is not diverse and inclusive, which many times is not, and there's a lot of bias. So a quick example, a big tech company 2 years ago had to recall their recruitment software. Why? Because it was favoring male CVs as opposed to women's CVs. And it just learns the keywords. Anytime it saw a woman, it would just drop that CV and prefer a man's one. So those are the issues that we have with technologies. And it's quite clear that we need human input, but at the same time, humans have bias. So I don't think, you know, technology is going to solve bias and humans is going to solve bias altogether. But the human input is definitely important, right from creating the job description, like, you know, whoever is building that job description knows what they want. But when we start thinking about DEI as well, and, you know, adding that intricacies in the overall process of hiring or even keeping employees in a company, a machine can't do that. A machine does not have emotional intelligence to understand, you know, what are the different emotions or authenticity that we're looking for in individuals. How do we retain or how do we keep are employees happy within an organization? Or even the talks we're having now about DEI and, you know, do leaders understand it? There's still a lot of, I feel it's a very nascent conversation. There's still a lot of work being done, a lot of things being unearthed, a lot of education being done. And until humans are fully educated, which I don't think will ever be, and even then, like, you know, machines cannot learn DEI as much. The only thing that they learn on is data. So the data would need to be diverse and inclusive, but that's the only thing. There's no form of emotional intelligence there. So I think the human input is needed from the start, you know, to the middle, to the end, wherever that ends, and all through the overall process.
Yeah, fair enough. And thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just add something? Toji, thank you for saying about the data. I've been talking about this for ages. Nobody talks about how dreadfully written CVs, resumes, whatever you want to call them this week, and profiles are that we're basing all of this AI on. Right now, there are a ton of recruiters out of work and they have some of the worst LinkedIn profiles I've ever seen. So you're absolutely right. We're never going to get it right because humans are fundamentally flawed. We can keep trying. So it's so lovely to hear you say that because it's so rare. Usually it's, oh, AI is the answer. I'm going, but what about the data you're using? Like, yeah, give it a chance. Like, oh. Anyway, sorry, I just had to add that.
That's it exactly. And so many people are thinking, oh, we're going to be replaced by an AI. AI is not there yet, right? And as we are on this topic, I guess it totally makes sense to bring the AI expert as well. So Vincent, is there a technological solution to the DEI challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe first to comment also a little bit on what Toju and Karenga just mentioned, which is, well, so there's a couple of things that resonated with me, which is one, the data is obviously a big question, not just the data that, if we're talking about AI, that AI is trained on, but also the data that's trying to operate on, right? So if you're looking at what do successful people from 20 years ago look like? Well, they don't look very diverse. So if that's the data you're training on, then you're not going to build a very inclusive AI. But the data you're operating on today is also a big factor. This is what Karenga mentioned. A lot of people just have really terrible CVs. That's okay. You don't want to hire somebody because they're really good at writing CVs. That's not the job skill you're looking for. So the concept of saying, oh yeah, I'm going to just write this brilliant AI that based on a really terrible CV is going to make a perfect decision is a fundamentally flawed idea. It's never going to work, no matter how smart your AI is. So I think that kind of gets to your main question, which was, well, is there a technological solution? And I would say there's definitely not sort of silver bullet here. One of the things that I've also noticed about the talks today is we haven't just talked about, say, interviewing or CV screening. We've talked about the whole picture from the initial attraction of talent, from sourcing to the selection process, but also retention and mental health. And so looking at how big this picture is, the idea that there's one technological solution is also just wildly unrealistic. So to make this a little bit more specific, what can technology do? Technology is very good at solving narrow, well-defined problems. So if within this scope of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can identify narrow, well-defined problems, then technology can help there. But the final picture will look like a concert of many different technological tools, but also humans that are part of the process. We should use technology to make humans more effective, not to replace them.
Fair enough. Thank you for sharing your perspective. Anyone else wants to add to that?
Yeah, I would like to just add, I think that technology is important. We're talking about kind of digital applications, but I think amongst a number of the groups that we are thinking about when we talk about DEI are people whose digital skills are quite weak. And I think we need to have routes to hire people. And I did a bit of research on this last year with a company, which doesn't involve purely a digital interaction. And it's not easy to do because most, as Katrina will know, most talent acquisition teams, everything's digital. There's more and more tech coming in all the time. But a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. And a lot of people aren't confident enough to actually answer a lot of the questions. So I think this needs to be factored in at some stage as well. It comes from above. I think one of the things I found is it's buy-in from leaders. And that's where it starts. There was a very interesting piece of research came out in the UK June time, so kind of after about 3 months of the pandemic, and there were, I think, about 30 or 40 talent acquisition teams had been asked various questions about their resourcing priorities, what they were and how they changed. And the things like candidate experience were still important and urgent. Sadly, diversity and inclusion was important, but seen as less urgent. In a time of panic, when people weren't know what to do, suddenly the focus was elsewhere. And I think, again, that a lot of that comes from leadership, a lot of that comes from the culture within the organization. So I think that we need to be aware that this isn't just for the good times when the business is doing well, but it's also, you know, a way of attracting applications from everybody, as opposed to just those who have great Wi-Fi connections, have a MacBook as opposed to a 15-year-old laptop that's been recycled and things like that.
Yeah. Actually, on the other side of that as well, Mervyn, it's like, what about if you have somebody that's dyslexic or dyspraxic? You know, you could use a tool like Recite Me on your website. Every website should have it. Yes. So that people can change the colors, use a ruler, enlarge text, which is really just great for anyone that's older, and make it easy to apply.
The questions like should be audio.
It's both ends, shouldn't it? Sorry,
you can have audio questions as well.
Yeah, yeah. Use what's available.
See, I think sometimes what it comes down to is that people are fearful because they don't know. They're going into unknown territory, not sure. So I want to do it, but I'm not sure how to do it and how to do it right. So I'll just stick to what I know. So you know, I think that there are some people out there that have the desire but don't have the know-how, and that's kind of the scary part, you know. But I think just on the back of what Mervyn was saying is that organisations, companies need to think about DEI as the underpinning everything. It's the golden thread throughout recruitment, retention, training, every bit of their organisation, and then it becomes a priority.
Very true.
So one thing I'd like to add also on the back of both comments is, so one of the talks earlier today talked about not going back to the office, which, you know, Swyg is a fully remote company, very proud to be so, and I'm personally very happy with that. This has created more opportunity for inclusion, just because like geographic location is no longer a limitation, but it also excluded other people, right? So people who are not tech savvy, like dyslexia was brought up as one example of something that can be a big barrier in using the technologies that we now use to bring people together. And I think this is one of the really interesting questions going forward for probably the next, you know, decade. I would like to see more companies create remote work options, because generally I do think that's a positive impact on DEI. But how to figure out how to not leave anybody behind, I think that's a major question to which I don't know the answer. And I would really like for us as a community to spend more time thinking about that.
There is a counter to working from home as well, which is that some people are working from home, others are living at work. So I'm a bit older, I've, you know, kids grown up, left home. I've got a room that is an office. Over the road from me, 4 people are flat sharing. They're all working from home. They're effectively working in their bedrooms during the day. And then after evening socializing, they're going to sleep in their office. So it's, you know, I think that with the remote working, there needs to be some flexibility. And some people are having to work from home in environments that are not good. maybe in a relationship that's not strong. You know, it's not the panacea for everyone, but it's important to have the flexibility.
And Mervyn,
Yeah,
you already
definitely
mentioned that your kids have left the house, but for parents with young children, working from home is a heck of a lot more difficult than.
No, I said I was one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, well,
but the polls are also,
I guess, but the point is there's differences.
Yeah. But the polls are also saying there's a hell of a lot of people that even if they don't have children who want to go into the office, they want to do both. So they want to work some of the time at home and some of the time in the office because they miss the bouncing ideas off each other. They miss the energy of their colleagues. So actually, I think going forward, most people will want flexibility, not just fully remote or fully in the office. They just want to be able to pick and choose.
Sorry, one of the things that it raised for me, this remote working, is the fact that when you've got these larger organizations, you might not know who Jack from HR is or Susan from accounts. You just get the email in your inbox because they're on the third floor, you're on the first floor, and you never get to meet them. But now it's all of a sudden with Zoom meetings and online meetings, you're in the same room as them. Oh, so that's what they actually look like. You know, so there are those elements as well where even though we're craving for that human contact, there are positives in other ways because it's bringing the team together in other ways.
Hence the mix. I think everyone loves looking into people's living rooms as well. Like I have definitely been checking out your backdrop, Tony.
Absolutely.
Can I say something?
And that's, yeah, of course, please do.
Can I say something? I'm a business systems analyst by trade, and I've been listening to all the conversations here, and I find that there are snippets of really interesting stuff, you know, especially from, is it Toju, Christy, even Vincent and Katrina, you know, that talk about the human aspect. And as humans, yes, we're all biased, but we also want to work with people we know, who we like, and therefore who we trust. But yet there is nothing that's coming out of the conversation that isn't looking as though this is all about the outward signs of difference. You know, I think was you, Christy, who actually said, you know, there's so many different levels in a person's character. It's how, you know, like you're talking about finding and retaining good people, but yet you don't talk about how do you fit people together. You know, you can't retain someone if they don't like who they're working with, if they don't like their boss. And if you've got a bad boss, it's just been highlighted by this pandemic. You know, you're not looking at how the people feel, how they feel connected, how it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, what your creed is, or your sexual orientation is. You have to look at the relationship between people. And until that is made center stage, everything else is a process. You know, and you can't have a process where you don't offer a solution.
Yeah, yeah, you have a point there, but I suppose if I'm to respond to that, my response would be that we all have to have a mindset that is opened. I mean, we are every human is biased, but recognizing your bias and having an open mindset, you know, in terms of connecting and then working together. If you're a leader, connect and then lead, and then seek to understand and then seek to understand really and see from the other person's perspective. Who are you dealing with? Who are you dealing with? What is their personality? What is their, how could you find a way to connect? Because it's true that if you don't like your boss, you would resign. But could you be open to see that, to find a way to connect and then work together? So openness for me, it's number one. Be open to connect. And sometimes it might not work. And and be bold enough to realize if it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing if it's not working. but be open enough to connect and then seek to understand and then make it work where possible. But also realizing if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Agreed, agreed. But what if I said there is a solution? How to actually connect people? Would people buy into that, do you think? As HR consultants, how would you feel about using, say, IT to see how people connect rather than just talk about this generalization of DE&I?
Hi, this is Stacy. I'm not a panelist, but can I respond to that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All are welcome. All are welcome
Go
today.
ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. Well, so I want to respond to that because that is one of the biggest pieces, right? Is the relationship building, and I'll give you an example. So I do a lot of unconscious bias education globally, and one of the things we always do is we start to teach people to create meeting norms. So we're all on these Zoom meetings now, and everyone is wanting to just jump into meetings, and I'm teaching people to take 10 minutes to connect and talk to each other. And so I was on a session recently where I was the third person to speak. They were doing a leadership development all day, right? So they've been on these calls for a couple of hours. I'm the third hour. And so I did this like, hey, let's connect, let's talk, and started talking to people. And one of the gentlemen on the call, it was all managers, he actually burst into tears and said, you know what, I'm really sorry. I just found out, earlier today that my a really good friend passed away. So he had been on these calls all day. Nobody had asked him how he was doing. Nobody had said anything to him, and he was making it through all of these calls with this burden on him, because no one had talked to him as a person. It was just like, okay, let's just get to the next session, and let's do. And so, to your point, John, we have to be in this place where we actually are actively relationship building. We actually have to do it. And the thing is, we don't do it. And it sounds so simple, but we don't do it. So I use that as the example because I see that again and again and again, where people just want to feel heard. And when they feel heard and they can open up, I think someone said it earlier, that we have to start connecting with each other. And the stories matter. When I know a little bit more about Christy, when I know her children, when I know her family, when I know why she works here, right? It's going to be a lot easier for us to work together and get to know one another. But you don't do that when you're in your own silos and you are in this place of, well, I'm only talking to these 4 people that I've always talked to, right? So it's like, we have to actively get outside of our comfort zone and start talking to people and open ourselves up.
That's amazing, Stacey, and thank you so much for sharing that. It's the element of human interaction. I know it was brought a couple of times. I guess it's always tricky, and Mervyn mentioned that earlier. The minute things happen, dramatic change happens on a company level, on business level, immediately the strategy changes, or all these good human practices are deprioritized, right? And this is a constant battle. I don't think anyone has figured it out. Well, hopefully we'll have them on the panel next time if they have figured it out. But it is probably one of the biggest challenges is how do we measure impact on a human level, on a people level, on a team level, on a company level. And diversity, equity, and inclusion shouldn't be the bigger picture. Exactly what John said. It should be on human to human level as well. Very well done. I don't know about you, but our group was very, very talkative, and we discussed a lot of things in only 15 minutes. Thank you so much to the moderators. I didn't have the chance to see the other 2 groups, but we are here to hear a bit more about what were the insights, what did you discuss in these 3 sessions, and thank you again for all of those who survived until 4:45 p.m. in the afternoon. Thank you so much for still sticking around. So without further ado, Ankita, would you like to start with telling a bit more about what we've discussed in your group related to future of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so you're right, Radina. I think our group spoke so much, and there were so many amazing points that came out of the discussion. So for instance, we discussed intersectionality. We discussed impact of people from different generations having different views on, how to manage diversity. And we also spoke about branding organizations differently, because in the past, a lot of organizations have been operating in a traditional manner and may not necessarily attract diverse talent that tends to only work in certain industries. So how organizations would want to rebrand such that they are able to get this talent. And we also spoke about mechanisms such as apprenticeships to give people the opportunity to to make an entry, and for companies to overcome the gap that exists in terms of diversity. And I think that's something which most organizations would be looking at in the future. So yeah, I think these were some of the things, and that organizations in general sometimes tend to avoid taking action because there's a level of risk involved when you are kind of isolating a certain community and a certain demographic. So we also spoke about that and how organizations really need to challenge themselves and get out of the comfort zone and look into this.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the lovely recap, Ankita. Really, really appreciate your time, and obviously the group's time as well. I hope you can connect to one another as well. I know Katrina had to leave, but I hope everyone else had the chance to tune in. And we're moving to Vincent. And I know you were talking about the technology, right? Technology and diversity and inclusion, particularly the intersection between the two. So what are your insights?
Yeah, so I'll just try to summarize what we talked about in our group, and also we had a pretty lively discussion. So in terms of what we discussed, we talked a lot about what some of the problems are, and some problems for which we don't yet know exactly what the right technological solution is. So for technologists out there that have that are looking for good problems to solve, I might have a few for you. Oh, by the way, Radi, can you hear me? It looks like your video has frozen.
Yeah, I can hear you, Vincent, I think.
Oh, Adam can still hear me. Okay, so
You
I'm
can
still
all hear
here.
me, yeah.
So maybe Radi is the one that dropped off. So we identified a few different problems. So one is companies' desire to become more granular in the data they collect about different demographics, and how they group demographics means that the individual groups become smaller. So if you start slicing the population into smaller groups to better track their backgrounds, each group becomes smaller and becomes harder to get like high quality data about them. So this was one theme, that if you don't have good data, you're going to have a hard time tracking success, which means you'll have a hard time achieving success. Then another thing we talked about was the transition to remote work, which means many of us now operate in a virtual setting, but a lot of the interaction between people that we're used to from our physical office setting haven't been transitioned into that virtual setting. So, for example, the serendipitous connections of someone that you might run into at the coffee corner, right? How do you recreate that in a virtual space? And we don't have an answer. We just identified that as a problem. But then linking that back to diversity and inclusivity, we identified, well, a lot of these virtual spaces are actually not that inclusive. They're inclusive now to maybe a different group of people, right? So remote work does give some people more opportunity to connect than they used to, but it also excludes, for example, people with disability or people that don't have access to the right technologies in terms of maybe having fast Wi-Fi or a laptop. And we ended up talking about how that might also be correlated with like origin of the individuals we're considering here. So there's some intersectionality in access to technology and individual background. Now, the one solution that was brought up was a mentorship program, which I think is an amazing idea. So to pair people who traditionally have less access to technology or might be less able to use technology with a mentor who can actually help them navigate that sometimes very complex technological world. So that's the short summary of what we covered in our breakout session.
Very interesting, and all this in just 15 minutes. Well done. Excellent.
Yeah, you
points.
can get
Thank
so
you for
much
sharing.
done.
See, that's when you utilize your time properly in an hour and a half. And last but not least, Deborah, would you like to share the insights from your group measuring success in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Hi, yes, absolutely. So we also had a lively discussion, and thank you everyone for contributing. We thought, varying things. So measuring success is hard. And that's really because there's quite a lot of discomfort in gathering the data. We talked about visible and non-visible attributes of diversity. Obviously on the sort of visible side being gender, race, ethnicity, it's perhaps easier to collect the data, although there's still discomfort around, what's legal, etc., to really mention today. And on the non-visible side, that becomes even more difficult. Teresa had lots of good points around, knowing what you're measuring being really important. And obviously it has to be behaviors, brand, language of D&I, and again, very soft skills that she thinks there are potentials to measure. So for example, through mentoring, disciplinary procedures. The disciplinary example is you can look at, on the basis of ethnicity, how the outcomes of disciplinaries to see if there's any bias within it. Again, though, that's using visible diversity characteristics. So I think that sort of in conclusion, it's difficult to collect the data, as we just said in the last room. The difficulty in collecting the data is because of visible and non-visible, and because of what's actually comfortable and legal for one to collect. Once we've collected it, we then have to really determine what we're measuring and why, and what does success look like. Would it be too simplistic to simply measure promotions, against different diversity criteria? Obviously, that's sort of slightly easier to measure than some of the softer behaviors and cultural inclusion data. So overall, I think it's something that companies really have to work on and focus on in order to sort of improve and focus on D&I altogether.
Beautiful. Wow. Thank you so much. That was very comprehensive and a lot of interesting discussions then. Great. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I guess this will basically conclude the very active part, the official part. Do you, remainers of the 21 people except of me, do you have any questions, anything that you'd like to bring up, any feedback for us? Obviously, we would love to hear whether that was an enjoyable activity, whether you'd like to join us again in the future. Hopefully we will organize many more sessions, and yeah, any other questions or topics that you'd like to bring up?
Can I just say thank you very much to Adam and Radina for organising this. I thought it was very insightful. It's good to connect with people across the globe on this matter, and just to really see what's happening in other places. One of the things that I do think is that there's intersectionality within intersectionality. Think about that one, but there is. But I just want to pick up, I really like this behaviour piece, because I think it does also underpin a lot, because when we're working through these pieces, there's an expectation that people can just change, but it really does depend on the behaviour, the culture, all of these matters. It could be a learnt behaviour that's been embedded from they were 10 years old, and they can't just change like that. So, these are the things that have to be considered. So if you do another one, if we could put a little theme of behaviour in it, that would be explosive. But thank you, organisers, and thank you everyone for having me.
Thank you so much, Tony. We really appreciate that, and you're totally right. I mean, it's so difficult to include absolutely everything in such a short time, but absolutely for the future we will include that. Definitely. Anyone else?
I want just to say thank you from all of us, because we are locked, and even I'm in Ukraine and you're in Ireland, and there are people from England and from the USA, but anyway, we are locked and it's our new life. And anyway, we want to socialize and we want to talk to people interested in the same topic. And now for me, it's even harder because I'm in my native country where this topic is just developing and we are trying to speak about it as much as possible. So it was a pleasure for me to be with you today and to hear about neurodiversity and all that very, specific things. So just thank you so much. It was a wonderful evening.
We appreciate your feedback and your inclusion as well in this event as well, Anna. Thank you so much. Well, in this case, I guess it makes sense for us to wrap up. Adam, Vincent, would you like to have some final words for everyone before they go for their dinner, cup of tea, cup of coffee, or whatever you need?
2 words. Thank you.
Yeah, less is more. That's it. Excellent. Many thanks, everyone. Have a lovely, lovely evening and stay safe.